Hello, everyone, and welcome to Higher Edification, a podcast about higher education and the challenges we're facing these days, and some of the solutions from great minds out there who are presidents and other leaders in the higher education space. Higher Edification is a production of Misericordia University, and I'm Dan Myers. I'm the president of Misericordia University, and I'm also known as President Dan on various social media channels, including TikTok. So look me up and follow along if you're interested. Today, we have a very special guest, Kathy Humphrey, the president of Carlow University. And President Humphrey has also started a podcast at Carlow, which is called A More Just and Merciful World. I hope that you'll tune into that podcast as well. You could search for it online and find it. And the inaugural episode is just absolutely terrific. And so I hope that you will take the time to search for that podcast and give that a listen as well. Right now, let's go ahead and turn to our interview with President Kathy Humphrey.
Thanks, Dan. And if anybody ever has the opportunity to see you swinging and dancing at some of these events, that's a special treat.
Yes, well, when Kristen gets me out there, we get going sometimes. So
you guys know how to kick up the dust.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. She does most of it. I just stand there and kind of move my arms and she dances around me, So, well, Kathy, I wanted to start off, just get a little background on you and how you ended up being a college president. I know I think you're a first-gen college student, and you grew up in a family with 11 brothers and sisters. There were 12 of you all together, right? And so how do you make your way from that? And what was your life growing up in terms of orientation toward education and things? And then how did you make your way into being a college president? That's a long trip for a lot of folks, for anyone really. But tell us about your background and how you got into this space.
So, it's interesting, right? So my parents moved from the Deep South to the Midwest with the hopes that their children would get an education, a better education. Now, you remember, I would have put you in a context here. It's Jim Crow time. It's separate but equal is the rule of the land. And my parents are fully aware that their children are not going to get the kind of education that they should get in the South. So they load up all the children. I wasn't born yet. But 9 of them were born, and load up all the children. It's funny, I was talking to my sister about this yesterday. It's like, what was the trip like? You can't even imagine, right? And brought them there with that hope that indeed that their children would get an education. And so, being a first generation student, becoming a college president was not what I said when I was a little girl that I wanted to be. but I did want to be a teacher from a very early age, and went to school to become a teacher, did become a teacher. And while I was at college, I recognized that, hey, wait a minute, there are things that I can do right here on this college campus for a career. And kind of made that decision that I would do that, came up through the student affairs route, and worked my way up. And every time I would get into another position, I would look at the person above me and I would think, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can do that. And I can have an even bigger impact on this group of people that I love so much, called students. And so at some point they said to me, well, if you want to be the VP of Student Affairs, you got to have a PhD. Of course, nobody in my family had a PhD, right? I didn't even know where to really begin, other than to just go to the academic advisor at that point and just jump in and say, what do I need to do to get this green card so that I can be a senior administrator at a university. And that's really how it really began, with this journey. And it was so important to my mom. I have to tell you, that one of her children would get a PhD. The week before she died, she said to me, Kathy, how long before you finish your PhD? And I looked at her. Of course, I had no idea she was going to die that week. And I looked at her and I said, oh, Mom, it's going to be a long time. You never know when you're going to finish this thing, right? And unfortunately, I often say, I should have said next year. I think she would have held out because it was that big a deal to her that one of her children would attempt to try to accomplish such a goal as that. So that's really how I got into this business. I got into this business because people all around me were making such an impact on my life. And I just thought, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And,
well, I was stalking you on the internet, Kathy, and I found out that your introduction to this work, and you didn't say it directly, but I will ask you about it because it's something you and I share is you were an RA, and that's what made you start thinking about this, right? You were a resident advisor.
It's funny you say that because I tell my RAs now today, I always say to them, I'm just a supersized RA. That's all I am. Supersized RA. But right, that's how I entered into this world as I became an RA on the floor, and started working my way up from the RA position to today.
Yeah. Well, that's the same with me. I didn't know that you could have a job working in student affairs as a career. It never even occurred to me, but I was an RA mainly out of financial necessity. I thought it'd be neat work. I knew some other RAs and I liked what they did, but I was, primarily doing it because I needed money to get through the rest of school. And then I discovered, there's this whole field, student affairs,
And I needed my own room. I needed my own room. That was the only way I was going to get my own.
That's funny. That's funny.
No, but that's true. I mean, I think many first generation students, we have to work our way through school. And that was a way for me to pay for my room, my board, and to get a single room. So I think it's so true that we don't think about those jobs oftentimes and the impact that they make on first generation students, but it's huge. It's sometimes it's the difference between whether they will be able to come back or not.
Yeah, for sure. We have several students like that here on our campus that I know about, and there's probably others who haven't revealed such a thing to me, but it was absolutely the case for me. And I know it's another thing you and I share is that we were both Pell kids. We were both Pell grant recipients. And, and that is another piece of powerful, support in getting through when you don't have my parents gave me a grand total of $20 for college, I'll tell you. So all those kinds of supports really made a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Even with the Pell Grant, I recall my senior year, because, in our business, every year you have to pay more, right? You're responsible for more. And I remember my senior year, my mother's saying, I'm saying to her, I'm just not sure we're going to pay for my senior year. And my mother looked at me and she said, if I have to scrub floors, we're going to figure it out. And we did, right? It's the commitment of the family. If you're fortunate enough to have a family who's so committed to your success, and all of our students don't have that. And that's one of the reasons why we recently created a program for foster and homeless youth here at Carlow, because I have an incredible passion for those who otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity because that's my profile.
Right.
Yeah,
it gives you a special sensitivity, right, from having experienced it. And so, I know and what it's like to struggle through in that way. And so it's an important part. I know of your commitment to your work in higher education and mine too, and why we're in the kinds of schools we are. But tell me a little more about the foster and homeless student program you have. That sounds incredible. How does that work? What's behind all that?
So true transparency, Dan, I was a foster mother before I adopted my children. They were foster children. And I often think about what their lives would have been like, right? Had we not had the fortune to be a part of their lives. And so I have a real burden for young people who are foster children. I often say, Dan, I often say, nobody would keep an 18-year-old if they weren't theirs. Nobody, because those are hard people to manage. So imagine if this is a foster child, this is not really technically your child, and they are aging out of the system. And so most of them either end up homeless, in the criminal justice system, being trafficked, prostitution. Many of them end up in spaces and places where we, as the greater society, still has to pay for them, right? And in my mind, it's this: we're going to pay for them no matter what. So why not invest in them on this side so that they can come out on the other side stronger and better and really an asset to our greater community. And so we made the decision. The stats are only 20% of foster children end up in universities, and only 3% of them graduate. And that's what that Carlow's founder that we share, Captain Macaulay, was a foster mother. And she helped other people's children. So this program is smack dab it's at the core of our very existence here at Carlow. And so when we made the decision to create a program that would wrap around these students, and that would, in actuality, provide them some of the supports that other students get just by the nature of being a part of a family. So we have 12-month housing. We have a support person that they can go to if they need assistance and support. We were fortunate enough to get a grant from Senator Casey to take care of some of the incidentals, some of those reasons why they don't persist. And I'm really pleased. We did our first cohort last fall, and 90% of those students are back.
That's amazing.
Semester. It's quite amazing. And so there was a program very similar to this in Western Michigan University. And so we've patterned this program after that program. And I'm believing we're going to make a difference in their lives because of it. And my goal is to get them to the finish line.
That's fantastic, Kathy. We have a program here for women with children, so single moms, and it has some of those same character that you've described. How are you able to? What are the financial aspects that you've put together to support? You mentioned a grant from Casey for incidentals, but you still have all the tuition, and you have the room and board, and other kinds of things that come up, and there's emergencies and things with people. How do you manage that? Where do you get the money to do this?
Yeah, so we've got a grant. We just got another grant to run that program as well. And I'm hoping that we are going to get some additional partnerships that will, in actuality, help us to support those students as well. They get full aid. That helps out tremendously. The foster children, actually, we were talking about this at our last meeting with Tom Foley. They actually get tuition, but they don't get room and board, which is the very essence of what they need, right? And so trying to support that from other programs, like merging this program with TRIO, right? And trying to, or merging this program with some other foundational programs that we have to support students. And one of the things that I'm trying to do this year is making sure every one of those students live on campus. Because we know that students who live on campus, back to our RA roots, Dan, students who live on campus retain at a higher rate. And so it's all about retention for me with this population. And so we're trying to make sure that that happens for them for next year. I belong to a sorority, and I'm trying to get that sorority to literally be the people who create the welcome baskets that, this kind of dawned on me. I was in the Sam's one day, and I was watching the parents get their sons and daughters ready and getting the sheets and towels and snacks. And I thought, who does that for a homeless child?
Mm-hmm.
Who does that, right? And so to find organizations that would be willing to pitch in and to do that kind of support for them is really important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who checks on them? Who says, how's it going today, right?
Mm-hmm.
How was that test? We've got some systems in place for that kind of support to happen, but that's just a piece of it, right?
It sounds like you've developed a lot of support for this. I'm wondering if you think there's something that's scalable or transferable to other universities. How could we're both at Mercy schools, right? Schools that were founded by the Religious Sisters of Mercy. And so this is part of how we really come at the world. But how do we get others to jump in and do this kind of stuff too? It seems like, I bet the demand is a lot higher than the supply.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the interesting thing about this is that we had to find them, right? And then what we found out is some students never declared. So then we had to figure out how we're going to get these students to declare that they need the support, right? And so we put it right on our application now.
Oh.
We put it right on the application. You can check it. You don't have to check it, but right on the application so that we know, hey, you're here, right? I think that's something everybody can do, to know that they are there. And once you know that they are there, I believe your obligation to make sure, just as we would do for an international student, your obligation to make sure that they are cared for, rises exponentially, right? So if you don't have 12-month housing, could you? The building's just standing there, right? What would it take for you to provide that kind of support for them? I think about them at holidays. And, so one of the things I do is I always make sure I'm usually in town for Thanksgiving, and I always send a note to say any student who does not have a place to go for Thanksgiving is welcome to my home for Thanksgiving dinner, right? Because what are they supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, but, the wonderful thing about it is they have an option. Many of them, I've had some, but many of them find friends and they go home with those friends and they're comfortable with them friends. Because, it's not always comfortable to be with that lady. But yeah, so I do think this is something that we could all do and all commit to. It's truly a great need and truly a great service. And talk about walking in the chaos of others. This program does that.
Well, tell for those of us who aren't those of us listening who don't know much about Carlow University, can you tell us a little bit about Carlow, its history, and kind of what you do, who you serve, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So Carlow University is where the Mercy started their work in the States. So they came from Ireland to this place. They didn't start Carlow University. They started an elementary school. And they came here, like they came to most places, to meet the next great need, right? So five gutsy sisters with absolutely nothing created Carlow University. And think about this, 1829, shortly, women were just allowed to vote, in 24. So you think about what these sisters had to do to create a elementary school and a university later, right? I don't know who is the first universities that Mercy created, but we weren't the first, but we have the first elementary school on our campus. And this is where the way they started their work. They started their work here to educate women, specifically Catholic women. But believe it or not, we have a lot of Jewish women who began their education here at Carlow with us as well. And so You think about all the problems that are going on in higher education right now financially. And I always think if those two sisters started this university with nothing, we can handle this. We can handle this.
Yeah, well, there's some parallels to the story here at Misericordia where, sister also gutsy sisters
Right.
who didn't have a lot of support. They weren't allowed to own property here when they started
Oh,
this place, and so they had to have a man out in the community that sort of bought the land and sponsored them, and it didn't start as a college either. I think started as a high school,
okay.
but it didn't take too long, and they transformed it. But lots of challenges here. They were threatened by the Klan. There was a big cross
Wow.
burning during those days. The Klan was very anti-Catholic. That was
Wow.
kind of their main thing, actually, in those days. And so there's a lot of really gripping stuff in the history of this place. But those women persisted, and we owe so much to them in terms of just their guts, and they're pushing to make something like this happen, but just, really giving us a certain kind of spirit and mission too. I'm just so grateful for that because it fits what I want to be doing as an educator so well.
Absolutely. And truthfully, their commitment to social justice, their commitment to serving is really what drove me here, right? I wasn't really thinking about Carlo. And I worked at that big university down the street for almost 20 years before I came.
Starts starts with a P, ends with an it.
That's right. And and I loved my time down there, but I didn't know much about Carlo until, I got the call to consider Carlo. And once I learned what was happening down here, I was very drawn to this work because it is the kind of work that I got into this business to do. And while I really believe I made a difference at Pitt, the difference that we make at this kind of institution, at our kind of institution, Dan, is a very different kind of difference, right? And I often say, when we graduate a student, because 44% of my students are first generation here. When we graduate a student, we don't just affect one life, we affect generations. That's what happened to me. And so it's crucial for me. When I stand up at commencement and I say, if you're the first person in your family to get a college degree or to get a master's or to get a doctorate, stand up. And when 60% of my graduates stand, the first year I did it, then I had to step away from the podium because it was so overwhelming to me that this is the work that I have chosen to dedicate my life to. And that is to try to really make a difference, not only for us, one student, but for their families. Because I'm going to tell you, it's not just the students standing up, it's their families just explode,
That's
right?
right.
And so it makes every minute, every hard thing we have to do so worth it.
Yeah. It's so true, Kathy. Those graduation days are just so powerful, and I feel it too when we're up there celebrating these people, and they come across the stage, and some of them are just so overwhelmed with gratitude and a feeling of accomplishment, and it's just incredible. Every single one of them. And we had one of the women from the Women with Children program who had 3 kids, and she was part of this program that had this wraparound nature that you mentioned. And it was just absolutely life-changing for her. And when she got her degree and it was this incredible moment. It blew up on YouTube and TikTok and everything because she was just so overwhelmed. And you could just see a transformation of, just as you're saying, her life, but also her family and her kids. They have a different idea about who they can be and where, that they can access higher education because it's wow. You want to make a difference as a person, and then you just see it right in your face there. It is incredibly overwhelming.
And to see it, just, to be embodied, to walk across that stage, there's just nothing like it. I'm a little weepy around graduation anyway, but really tough. It's tough because you didn't do it. You had a little bit to do with it, just a little bit, to impact that life.
Well, these days, we're one of our charges as presidents and administrators, just to keep these institutions going because it is a challenging environment out there right now. You mentioned some of this, and the sisters had it tougher, but it's not easy right now. And so you're finishing your third year as president. Am I right? Okay,
Right.
yeah. So we're
I think
we're
we
the
started
same
at the
then.
same time. Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. And so, what's it been like? What do you see going on out there in higher education? I mean, it's to me, it's such a contrast sometimes with what you just said about what we're doing and what we're about, and the way we get painted in the press sometimes, where they use kind of exotic examples of the Harvards and the whoever's. I mean, that's not really our reality in terms of what we're trying to do, most of us out in higher ed.
It's interesting, right? So what frustrates me the most about the rhetoric that we hear is that, you know, maybe some people don't need a college degree. And um, I can support that. But a person of low economic means, a person of color, oftentimes do not have the network to be able to be successful without a tool. And I worry that we send that message to people who are marginalized, and maybe they go and get a skill, but that's all they can do. And so we create another class because when that job ends, and we've been around enough to know that job's going to eventually end because somebody's going to come up with a way to do it without you, then what do you do? And the notion of critical thinking, being able to analyze, being able to come up with new solutions, you haven't been exposed to because you were only taught how to do one thing, if that, right? And
Mhm.
so I find that concerning. I also find it concerning that the very people who are spreading that rhetoric oftentimes are sending their kids to college.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm always surprised by that because if you truly believe it, then you start with your own children. You
Right.
you don't start with other people's children giving a message that they can do this without. So that's one of my concerns about that rhetoric. But I think that you're right. We are in some very difficult times, mostly because the enterprise has changed. And I think that in my nearly 40 years in this business, this is the first dramatic change higher education has endured as an enterprise, as a difference. This is the first time where you literally can't just talk about curriculum change, you have to do it. You can't just talk about how you're going to manage this in an artful farm. You've got to acknowledge that this is a business, and the business is changing people's lives, but it is still a business that must be run, that must have margins, that must be able to pay its employees, manage its facilities, right? And pay the greater debt to society by making sure these students get to their destination, right? So I think that we have to rethink how we've done everything we've done, right? This notion of seeing each other as competitors, because that's the way it's been, right? But the reality, if we would just take hands on many things, if we would share on many things, we really could do this work easier and better. You think about our back office functions. We talked about this from sometimes in our mercy meetings, but we just talk.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you think about the back office functions. It Financial aid is financial aid all over this country. Why do we all need financial aid offices?
Mhm.
Why don't we have a unit that manages financial aid office for several universities?
Mhm.
We could probably do it more streamlined, more powerful. We could probably provide even more support to the student through the process. But because we don't want to share, we don't, right? I don't know about you, but I have one person who does payroll. It scares me to death, actually. Right? But why? Why do we need to work like that? Right? You think
Mhm.
about economy of scales. If we all bought together with used our procurement as one system, imagine the buying power we create just by binding together. We buy a lot of toilet paper, all of us. If we had a toilet paper contract, something that simple, that we could maybe slice what we're paying in half simply because we have the volume, we have the economy of scale, right? But we are not serious about doing those things that are really going to make an impact that we can pass along to the student and increase the return on their investment.
I just want you to know, you just cracked up my producer, Alicia, in the background when you said the toilet paper thing. So she's suppressing a laugh back there. But it's true, though, isn't it? But let me ask you this. Why is it so darn hard for us to share, to do what you just said we should do? I mean, I think if you ask any individual president in conversation, would there be efficiencies to be achieved by sharing in this way? They'd say yes. And yet when you try to do it, and I've been trying to do this since, 20 some years not when I was a president, but when I was back at Notre Dame as vice president, we were part of these consortia of colleges and universities. And it was so hard to get anyone to collaborate. I think, why is that so hard for us?
Yeah, and we're so smart for it to be this hard, right? And I just think the way of thinking for since 1636 has been, every institution is an independent and must stand on its own. And while that worked for hundreds of years, it won't continue to work because of the way we do things, right? I mean, there are so many things that it's hard to understand. Why don't we just bite the bullet and do it? Just why don't we do it? I don't know what the fear is. I am going to participate in a shared uh, group around procurement.
Mhm.
They are putting that together for us now, and we are going to participate in that. And I'm hoping that that is going to take off so that we can do other things like IT
Mhm.
as well. But I think the first part of it, Dan, is I think literally putting your foot in the water
Mhm.
and making a decision that you're going to do it.
Mhm. Well, I'm grateful that we have ACOP, the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities of Pennsylvania, because they have put up some programs like this that people can participate. I'm sure you participate in some of them. We do in some of them. And that's a start, but there's so much more, as you're saying, that could be done. And I congratulate you for taking some steps forward, at least with the procurement stuff. But there's a lot more. And, I think maybe in years gone by, it was tougher because we were more localized and it'd be harder for, like us, we're not near anybody, 20 minutes away, Kings and Wilkes are there. But it's tough sometimes because you're in your environment, but we don't have those same constraints anymore. I mean, the ability to share digitally and things has really changed a lot in the last decade.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Exactly.
I'm hoping we'll see more as we go
Yes.
ahead.
Right.
But,
But
yeah.
our world has truly changed. I know I was having dinner with some friends the other night, and they were telling me that they were donating to an NIL, and I thought, this is insanity. That our new world is literally now paying students, athletes, right? That we're fun, right? We're not, because we're Division III, right? Our athletes are
Right,
not
right.
NIL, but there are universities out there that are, and this is our new world. Our world
Mhm.
has just,
It's really skewed. I do wonder, Kathy, if this challenge that we're facing right now with the demographics of 18-year-olds graduating from high school is going to induce people to really start getting more serious about changing what they're doing because I mean, we've already seen it in the last 3 years. I don't know, 45, 50 schools of our type, private, nonprofit, uh, um, smallish schools have gone under, and we see it in the press almost every week now. There's somebody else that's gone down.
Yeah, we
And
had two
so,
go down in Pittsburgh within this month. And it's concerning, right?
mhm,
Uh, and uh, and you do wonder um what's going to be the end of that, right?
yep,
Uh, so, and we talk about these things all the time at our ACUP meeting, this notion of what kind of institution is valuable enough to be supported by the state and which one is not. And I do think all of those questions that we have to consider when we are talking about education, educating the next generation of students.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, kind of irony right now, I guess, that in Pennsylvania, at least, the average private school after scholarshiping is actually cheaper than the state schools, and it costs the state a lot less to help get one of our students through to graduation than it does at the state school. Most people would never guess that. And the students actually, a lot of them, I mean, if you go to Penn State, on the average, you could pay more than going to one of our schools. It's kind of it's really shocking to people to hear these things sometimes, but that the market's changed in that way.
Absolutely. And I think because most people don't realize that, our discount rate is they're steep, that they hear private and immediately assume that it will be more. But most of the time, and it's probably the same way for you, once a student hits our campus, most of the time we got them. Because there is a different care here. There is a different, I literally say all the time around here, we love our students. I don't just say, we respect our students, what we do, but we love these students because that's our first job, you know,
Right.
love and care for them. And I think because once they hit the surface, they see it and they feel it. But it's getting them there, is sometimes a challenge, right?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Uh, so, Kathy, I don't actually know where Carla exactly is in Pittsburgh. Like, if I was looking at the map, are you on the outskirts somewhere? Are you downtown?
No,
Where are you?
so do you know where the University of Pittsburgh is?
Yes.
Okay, I'm 2 blocks away.
Oh, okay. You're right there. Okay.
I'm
Very good.
right in the heart of Oakland. So we're not downtown,
Yeah.
but we are probably a mile or two away from downtown.
Okay. Okay.
Right, yeah, right in the city. In
Well,
the
that's good. When I was a kid, we lived in Pittsburgh for 3 years, I guess,
Oh,
and we lived in Penn Hills out there somewhere.
okay.
And but I became a Steeler fan during that time because it was during when Terry Bradshaw and Lynn Swann and Franco Harris and Mean Joe Green, they were at the top of their game. They're winning their Super Bowls during that time,
Right.
and so we caught the Steeler bug, and we still have all the Steeler paraphernalia and follow them every year. So.
You know what? It's amazing to me. When we got here, our children were young and they came home and they said, we need our jerseys. And assumed that they were talking about their school jerseys, but oh no, they indoctrinate the children very young here. They needed Steeler jerseys so that they could wear them on Fridays. But, so I thought, oh, so this is how it happened. So, of course, we are Steeler fans, but I'm originally from Kansas City.
Uh,
So I must be both. I have to
yes.
and a Steeler fan.
Good for you. Yeah. I have these teams that I root for, and unless they're playing the Steelers, then I got to flop. When
Exactly.
I go home to the Steelers when I
I know.
when I have to.
When the
So
Steelers and the Chiefs played, we always said, well, we'll be happy no matter what happens today.
yeah. How old were your kids when that happened? How old were they when they started
They
in?
were in eighth grade. They were in
Okay.
eighth grade, and it was like it was a requirement. We need our jerseys. They asked me for that, like they asked me for their school supplies.
Yeah. Here's my school supply list. I need pens, pencils, a calculator, and Steeler
Get
jersey.
a Steeler jersey, okay? And then
That's
I'm so
great.
foolish, I don't even know the rules. So they get some player that is a one and done. So the next year I've got to buy another jersey, right? Because I don't know the rules.
I remember when we moved to Pittsburgh, it was we didn't really know anything about football before that. We didn't follow football. And my mom bought me this little NFL rule book on how everything worked. And I'm memorizing the referee signals and things, you know. But it was such a part of the culture
Oh
at that
yeah.
time, especially because they were peaking for the first time, and the whole city was just nuts and completely unified across every divide you could think of in support of the Steelers. You know, it was a very interesting moment.
It's very much still like that, right? It's you can tell if the Steelers didn't win. The city just feels like it's sad. The whole city feels sad.
Mhm. Well, when I went to be a faculty member at Notre Dame, I was kind of sick of football at that point because I Ohio State for 9 years and then Wisconsin when they were peaking, and I was just like, no, no more football. So I wouldn't go to the games, and I didn't really pay much attention the first couple of years there. The students were aghast that I didn't know what's going on, but I could tell, just like you're saying. I walk in my class on Monday, and I immediately knew whether we won or lost on Saturday. It's
But it's
really
really
something.
the love of the game.
Yes, yes, it's something else. So, well, so Kathy, I want to wrap up just by going back to your family of origin here because you told me you have 11 siblings, and that has also produced over 100 nieces and nephews. Do you know who all these people are? What's a family reunion like for you all?
Well, let me just say that when we have Christmas dinner, we have to rent out a hall. So it's so uh and when we do family reunions, oftentimes we stay in a residence hall. And we are in the building by ages, right? So the young people are up top, and it is an exciting time. One of the ways we keep up with each other is that for family reunions, we have everybody's name on the t-shirts, and the children are underneath their parents. Now, my portion of the t-shirt is this small because I only have two sons, a daughter-in-law, and a grandson. But I have a brother who takes up half the shirt because he has like 56 grandchildren and great-grandchildren, right? So it's that's kind of how we keep up with everything with the t-shirt.
That is amazing and so much fun. But also just like, I mean, I guess you came from a big family. Must have been a good experience. It sounds like most of your siblings must have big families. If there's 110 nieces and nephews, then they're gonna have 8, 9, 10 kids each or something like that, you
Well,
know?
it's interesting. The boys have big families. The
Ah,
girls' families are relatively small.
uh-huh.
It's because the girls did all the work growing up.
There you go. There you go. Well, I will say, I bet you that life, growing up with all those brothers and sisters, prepared you well for life and community at a university and for dealing with, students, right? Because you all were students, and
That's right.
so I
Right.
could hear that in your experience. That is absolutely wonderful. I used to think our family was kind of big. There's 5 of us, but no, no, you got me beat.
Absolutely. Well, when we are trying to trim our budget and and come out with a balanced budget, I always tell people I've been doing this all my life, right?
See all these experiences come
Yeah,
back to
I
help
tell
you
you,
out later on.
my mother could stretch a dollar like you couldn't even define how this woman fed all these people every day, of her life. And nobody went hungry, nobody went without what they needed. We didn't have a lot of extras, but we had what we needed because she was able to budget, and she was able to be innovative with how she used the resources that we did have. And we didn't have a lot, but she spread those resources so that we were well covered.
Well, Kathy, that's wonderful, and I could see that your life experience in so many ways, it just made you an ideal leader for a place like Carlow and the mission that you've taken on to be a leader in higher education in this very special way. And I just want to say congratulations to you. Thank you. And keep up the good work, Kathy. It's just
Yes,
great to hear about what you're doing. It's really in that mercy tradition. I just love to hear that. So
absolutely, Dan, and congratulations to you. We made it through year 3. So that means next year we're seniors, Dan.
that's right. Yeah. Well, you really are in the president world. The average tenure in a presidency, this is less than 6 years now. So
No,
we're going
I
to be
think
part of the old people soon.
I
So
know. Well, I heard somebody say that the tenure now is about 3.9 years. And
is that right? Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
I think I heard that at the CIC conference this year.
Oh my
That
Lord.
is the average time of a university president, 3.9 years. It's hard work,
It
and
is.
oftentimes I say to people who tell me they think they want to be a college president, I said, you better understand your why, because your why is the only thing that's going to sustain you. And your why is the only thing that you're going to go home with at night and wake up in the morning and start all over again. Is that your why is motivating you and keeping you in the business. So, Dan, thank you for this
Yeah.
opportunity to share with you, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.
I'm sure we will, Kathy. So it's been great talking with you. And everyone out there, I just want to say thank you to President Kathy Humphrey, who's the president of Carlow University, for being with us on Higher Edification today. I'm Dan Myers, the host and the president of Misericordia University. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope that you will tune in for the next one. Until then, keep your mission in mind, keep your why in mind, folks, and go out there and do your best work. Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye, Kathy.